I'm Peter from the Daily Rios.
And I'm Eric from Longbox Review. And this is Peter and Eric's Legion Project Podcast.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Legion Project Podcast. We are back again. Hey, Eric.
Hey, Peter.
How are you this fine Monday night?
I am doing very well, despite my my recent injury.
Yeah, you are injured lad today, right?
That's right. I am one-footed guy.
One-footed guy. Hobble guy.
Yeah, hobbled lad, yeah.
Hobbled lad. Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. Oh well. But other than that, I'm doing just fine.
Do you get to read more comics because you're laid up?
You know, that first couple of days, this actually happened on a Saturday night where I rolled my ankle pretty damn well and could not put any weight on it. So. Let's see here. So Sunday, the following day, and Monday, at the doctor's advice, the emergency room doctor's advice, I had to keep my foot up and iced, and keep my weight off my foot. And so I watched a lot of TV, and I read a lot of comics. So that was actually very nice.
All right, a little bit of a trade-off then.
Yeah. Got to read some trades that I've been sitting on my shelf for a while. So that's usually my go-to when I have time like that, is to read a bunch of trades that I've been waiting to read and catch up on my the weekly books that I read. Yeah.
Any standouts? Anything that you were like, wow, why haven't I read that earlier than now?
I did just read. What is it? The Mirror Broken, was that the Star Trek The Next Generation book by J.K. Woodward?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That had just come out recently, so I read that. And then we had talked, remember, Secret Identities?
Sure, yeah.
And so I read another of Jay Faerber's books, Dynamo 5, Volume 1.
Oh, yeah, I like that one. What'd you think of that?
I enjoyed it quite a lot. I wasn't too sure about it at first when I was first getting into it. But the more I read, the more I enjoyed that universe. So I'm going to be getting the other volumes.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm a fan of that one. That's where I first saw Mahmoud Asrar's artwork.
Ah, okay.
And been trying to follow him ever since. So yeah, very cool. Very cool.
And you have a show going on right now, right?
Yeah. My Drowsy Chaperone directed that. It's got 2 more weekends of performances, so I'm not really needed anymore. The show's done, my part's done. So I stop in every now and then just to check to see how they're doing.
Oh, so you don't attend every night that they perform?
No, I used to do that. I can't do it anymore because I get a little tense when things go wrong. So. I find it's best just to not go all the time. And then it's fun to watch, like when I do pop in and I get to see like, oh, they've added through a natural just process. Maybe they found, it's not like they change it, but they just find like maybe a new way to do something, or there's a new rhythm of a certain scene, especially in a comedy. So it's kind of nice to see the little things that happen that grow from opening to closing. So, yeah, it's better that way.
Okay. I just remember in my my youth when I was doing local community theater, the director, and we basically just had one for all the shows. He'd be there every night in the back taking notes.
Yeah, like I said, I used to do that, but it's all right. It's good to let your child go. Just let it do what it's going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Episode 6. This is good, right? It's not a multi-part issue story arc. It's just a one and done. So, we may have some other things to talk about later in the episode. But why don't we start off with some feedback from episode 5?
All right. So we have here from Mike. We got some general feedback from Mike first, and then some episode 5 specific feedback. So let's see here. Mike says, Peter and Eric, I just want to thank you for renewing my interest in the Legion of Superheroes.
Yay!
I know, right? That I read that when I first read that. I'm like, oh my god, that just makes everything worth it. He says, I'm certainly reading along. In fact, I am from Illinois, but recently started a new job in Utah and have brought my Legion Baxter run with me specifically to keep up with your podcast. I mean, that is just wonderful. He says, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but there are very few that I am in lockstep with in rereading the comics that are reviewed. He says he won't rehash all of the plot points that we make, but suffice to say, I am more in line with Peter regarding my enjoyment of this storyline. That's okay. I figure I'm in the minority here, as we've been discussing over the last 5 episodes. As a JLA fan, first and foremost, he always considered Wildfire. I thought this was a neat comparison. Wildfire as the Legion's Green Arrow, brash but heartfelt, hot-tempered but well-meaning. Even without a face, he was my Wildfire. I was still on Green Arrow. Even without a face, he was my favorite Legionnaire. I'm glad Giffen liked him as much as I did. And then for episode 5 feedback, Lytle has really hit his stride with the art in that particular issue. The splash page is striking. Not to be morbid, but it is eerily reminiscent of the Sue Dibney elongated man scene in Identity Crisis. So I wanted to ask you about that, Peter, if you've got that same vibe, I guess.
When he mentioned it, I mean, I certainly could see the comparisons where elongated man is sort of wrapped around the corpse of his wife, because she was also burned. So she had sort of the same kind of injuries and things, and he was crying, and I can't remember if there was rain or maybe it was like water from the sprinkler system or something like that. So I didn't make the connection, but when he said it, I was like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, I could see that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then finally, Mike says, I have to say, Princess Projectra's execution of Nemesis Kid felt 1,000,000 times more righteous than any other neck-breaking DC incident, such as Wonder Woman, Max Lord, or Superman General Zod. Maybe it's because she invoked royal privilege. Thanks again for a great podcast. Nostalgia is a great thing, which is precisely why we're here.
Yeah.
Do you want to do Brian's?
Sure. Brian Wenberg. In your latest podcast, you talked about how people found it difficult to believe that Princess Projectra was able to so easily take down Nemesis Kid. If you know his power, he can only counter one power at a time, and as Projectra went to him, she used her illusion powers, which he countered. She then beat the hell out of him with the skill in close combat that Karate Kid taught her. She did a feint. She go ahead and counter the illusion, but it's not going to help against a fist. And that's a good point. I mean, that's something I don't think we brought up necessarily. Where she, I remember the panels where she says, look into my eye or something like that. And I could see that, even if he tried to counter the illusion or it got to be too powerful that he had to use all his power, that she could go in and then do what she needed to do. I mean, since it was all off panel, it's not quite certain what she did. If all she did was just reach and snap his neck, did she hit him a few times? Yeah, I could, that's certainly a good summary of what you could get from that sequence. And then he goes on to say, by the way, I've been in martial arts for many years, and it's hard to break someone's neck, but with technique, it can be done without much strength. Don't you love the topics we get to talk about?
I know, right?
I assume Jecki has been taught by Val. Think of some of the things you see Black Widow do in Iron Man and Avengers, using her whole body to take bigger men down. Sure, that's obvious. Yeah,
that's very true. We didn't address that fight scene in that way, and you know, with Brian pointing that out, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. And he says, still loving the Legion podcast. Look forward to the next.
Oh, good.
So if you want to give us some feedback, please do. You can reach me at Peter at the Daily Rios and Eric
at longboxreview@gmail.com.
And you can certainly find us on Twitter. We appreciate all the feedback, all the retweets, the likes. It just helps to, build this little podcast community that we have talking about the Legion. And it's kind of cool to see people reading along. You know, that's something we certainly want with this type of podcast. And it just, and especially people who haven't ever read this at all, you know, are they able to enjoy it in the way that in my brain, when I was younger reading it, you know, I sort of think, God, I always say this was one of my favorite Legion runs, and it's kind of fun to revisit and see what works and what doesn't work. So hopefully the listeners get to play along as well.
You know, that reminds me, Peter, I've been meaning to bring this up with you. What we are doing here with this podcast is very much what I hope. Well, let me back up here. I listen to a lot of podcasts. One of them is the West Wing Weekly. And so what they do, the two hosts, one of which is Josh Molina, who used to act on the show, they get together and they talk about an episode per week, essentially, kind of like what we're doing issue by issue with the Legion here. And I watched West Wing back in the day when it was first on. I was a big fan of it and remained so. And then when I heard about this podcast, I started watching the shows, and so much like I'm doing with Legion, I'll watch an episode and then I'll listen to their podcast episode.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of hoping that maybe our podcast will be for the Legion Baxter run what the West Wing Weekly is to me, in terms of getting me, well, one, revisiting something that I know I love, but also being excited about revisiting it and finding out new things that I never thought about before.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'm getting that just talking with you, but I'm hoping the listeners are maybe getting a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, and I think that plays out even with this issue, where I have a lot of Legion knowledge, and I have a lot of issues that I've read, but there's a lot of issues that I haven't read. And unlike, I can talk about New Teen Titans and make connections, that are like crazy connections. I can do that for that. I can do it for Crisis, but I'm not quite as up to par with this one, with
Mm-hmm.
Legion. So the reread of this is interesting because I get to do research, and we're going to, even in this issue, I found some things in this issue that made me look at this issue in a different light. I try to read these issues once, 2 or 3 times before we record, and I'm finding really interesting things and connections, and it's helping to shape my love of the Legion in different and new ways as well. So I think that's one of the fun things about revisiting older classic runs.
Yeah, I totally agree that, I think during a off-mic conversation with you, I had made the comment that I'm not a big fan of origin retellings, and which is a large part of what this issue is. But after rereading this issue, I came away from it liking it more than I thought I would.
Oh, good. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, we might as well go into the issue, but before we do, we have to thank composer Row Music for our theme song, Lost City, which you can find links in our show notes for that person's amazing introduction that we use for our podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we that's all we had for feedback, so why don't we jump right into issue 6 and get into the meat of this episode.
All right. So issue number 6, Legion of Superheroes. This is entitled Silver Linings, written by Paul Levitz, as is usual, with guest penciler Joe Orlando, Larry Malstead on inks, John Costanza continues as our letterer, Carl Gafford is colorist, and Karen Berger, as always, editor.
And then we have Steve Lytle and Larry Malstead doing the cover.
Oh, right, of course, yes.
Yeah. Why don't you do the synopsis, and then we'll kick it off with, like we did last episode, like just sort of like our main thoughts on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go into more specifics.
All right. So in this issue, Zamir, is that how you pronounce it, Peter? Zamir?
Yeah.
Zimmer?
I mean, I would sort of say Zamir. Zimmer's kind of fun though because of like his teleportation thing. But
yeah,
whenever there's that whole apostrophe thing going on, who can tell?
Well, in my head, it's always Zamir for some reason.
Right.
Arrives at its laboratory with Ayla and Mech in tow. He probes their memories. You know, can't have a good alien abduction story without probing to find out more about them, thus recapping the siblings' origin story. Zamir plans to use the siblings to power his machinery. Mech predictably blames Ayla for his present predicament. Meanwhile, Cosmic Boy and Dream Girl discuss their inability to locate the still missing Legionnaires. And Wildfire is a bit pissy at Invisible Kid for what happened in Tales of the Legion number 318. Ayla and Mech escape their bonds only to be bound by some underwater tentacles, eliciting another flashback sequence of when Ayla pretended to be her resurrected brother, his actual reunion with his team, her transformation into Light Lass, and the start of her relationship with Timberwolf. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in that flashback. Then Zamir's cyborgs recapture the siblings, who fight against them, and Zamir, having enough of the nuisance his captives have hoisted upon him, sends them home. I guess that's all you need to do is to escape a villain's grasp, is just annoy them to hell. Meanwhile, in Limbo... in that Limbo universe, the still missing Legionnaires, Ultra Boy spots an inhabited planet and steers the bubble toward it. Back to Ayla and Mech, they land on Winath and proceed to fight once again, with Ayla prevailing this time and denouncing her brother once and for all. And then after some rest, Ayla heads back to Earth, arriving at the Legion headquarters in her Lightning Lass uniform. Thus endeth the issue.
All right. So what did you think overall of this, what they're calling on the cover, Spotlight on Lightning Lass?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not a big fan of Legion origin retellings. It seemed like during the run of the Legion that I read back many years ago, it seemed like every once in a while Levitz and company would just throw in an origin story like this or Wildfire or something. As it always seemed like filler to me. Like they had nothing better to do, so let's do a recap. And so I don't know, for whatever reason, those stories kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Like I wasn't getting my money's worth, or they were intentionally putting off the story that I want to read with this interlude. And so like I said, I didn't like it. And I generally think they don't really bring anything new to the table, usually. However, on this particular issue, I thought while it has nothing really to do with the retelling of the origin, which I'm really interested now, Peter, what you said earlier about finding new things here. So I'm wondering if there was anything new in the flashback stuff that you found. But what I really responded to was the thing that I kind of made fun of a second ago. Yet another fight between these two siblings. We've seen at least 2 direct fights between Ayla and Mecht in the previous 5 issues, and we have this final one, which I'll talk about some of those things later. And then we have Ayla's determination to move on from this experience and move on with the Legion. And then we get her becoming a much more prominent member of the team, I think, going forward, right?
Oh, sure, definitely. Yeah. And that's something in my notes to talk about as well.
Oh, good.
Sort of the not to jump ahead, but sort of the aftermath of what this issue, or at least the potential of this, what could happen. Yeah. What was your takeaway? and what was your emotional takeaway, I guess you could say?
Well, obviously it's very much an epilogue to the Eye for an Eye storyline. So
sure.
While it's really while I can see why they wouldn't include it, collectively as part of that, because it's very focused on Ayla and the Ranz's history, but everything beyond the origin retelling is very much still a strong part of the Eye for an Eye story, and in many ways, in my mind, it ends the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just about what happened with Projectora and Karate Kid and Orando. It's this thing between Lightning Lord and his sister. And you couldn't have, to me, it wouldn't be a good story if you didn't have some sort of resolution there.
Right.
And we get that in this issue.
I mean, the whole issue 1 Eye for an Eye story arc opens with Lightning Lord.
Exactly. There's no resonance if we don't have that at the end. Right. Yeah, I came away originally, so these are some of my notes on like the first reread, because I had read this issue before. So rereading it for the first time, many of the same things you just said. It's a filler issue, certainly a filler issue artistically. Almost to the point where it feels like an inventory issue, and I'll flesh that thought out in a little bit. It's an issue that has to do a couple things, most notably set up Ayla as returning to the Legion, as you said. Also, as you said, it's an epilogue to Eye for an Eye. Her return to Wineth at the end, the same supporting characters that we see in issue 1. It's all an echo. She's brought back to where she was captured, and originally by Radiation Roy. So it's an interesting journey for her through the 5 issues where she's taken away from where she thought she felt safe, brought back to that same point, and then she makes the realization that, this isn't quite where I need to go. This isn't quite where I need to be. I understand where I need to be now. Mm-hmm. And there's some other connections to other issues that this brought up too. So, yeah, I initially, and I think I even texted to you where I was like, wow, this felt like kind of like a clunker. And in some regards, that whole concept of it being sort of like an inventory issue, it really does feel that way. Certainly it's a guest artist, Paul Levitz. It feels like this script makes references to the first 5 issues, but they aren't necessarily specific. They're like general references. Zamir saying things like, when the villain's plan to take to go to another universe failed, I fled.
okay, there's no specifics there. It's a general thought. So I feel like he could have written this script even when the Eye for an Eye story was being completed or created. They could have been at issue 3, issue 4, and he could have written this issue on his downtime and just said, okay, I got to hand this off to an artist because I know where these characters are going to go by the end of issue 5, but I don't need in issue 6 for it to be so specific. I can just isolate them into the story. And if you read the first 5 issues, great. If not, I almost feel like the references are so general, you could read this issue on its own. Maybe you don't quite get the weight of this battle, but it certainly is a much better read if you have read the first 5 issues.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, something about it initially felt kind of clunky, incomplete. And then I read it again and I did a little research on Ayla in the past 2 to 3 years leading up to this issue. And then also reading about Joe Orlando, the guest artist, in the letter columns helped to complete some other thoughts I had about this issue. And it actually made me wind up liking her part of this story more than I did the first time I reread it. And I came away after a second or third read going, okay, you know what? I appreciate this issue a little bit more, even if I'm a little hard on it in terms of some of the art, in terms of some of the story. So I sort of came away with a little bit more of an appreciation for it.
So it's interesting. You bring up when they may have worked on this particular issue, and I through the Legion Companion book, and I know I keep bringing that up every episode, but it has such a wealth of information that speaks specifically about that timeline, I guess, in terms of when they were working on stuff.
Oh, cool.
So I'm curious.
We'll see if our notes line up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what do you have?
Let's see here. So according to the Steve Lytle interview in the book was already behind schedule when Lytle got the job, when he started working on it. And he specifically mentioned that Joe Orlando was already working on issue 6 when Lytle was working on issue number 1. So your supposition that guess that Paul Levitz was using the vagueness of his references, that totally plays into that timeline then. So
do you mean issue number 3, Steve Lytle's first issue?
I'm sorry. Yes, that's what I.
Yeah. Okay.
His first issue is what I meant to say. Yes.
Right.
Which was issue 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it felt like. It felt like it's kind of what I said about. I know we're not talking about the Tales issues, but every now and then there are certain scenes in the Tales book that sort of play the same way. Let's be a little vague, tease our readers a little bit, Yeah. So that's good. Was there anything else from the companion? And by the way, I like that because I don't have that book, so it's great that you're able to do that.
I think that's it.
Yeah, and apparently it took Joe Orlando 3 months to do this issue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was his first full-length art gig in the 17 years since jumping over to editing a bunch of DC's weird books and horror books and their side genre books. And this was from the letter column from Legion Baxter issue number 11 about this issue. So I like to jump ahead and read what readers thought about the issue that we're reading, and that was some information that I got from there. And the other thing I got we always like to talk about the cover, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about the Baxter cover versus the Tales cover. And one of the things in your notes, and this is something that we always talk about, like the comparison between the two of them. On the Baxter issue, Ayla is not in costume. In the Tales issue, she's in costume. And a lot of that is the main reason for that is when Steve Lighta was doing the cover for number 6, he had no idea what the costume even probably looked like, I would think. You know, if you have to get covers in advance, if he's not really, you know, this is before the internet, so it's not like Joe Orlando could just take a picture and send it to him. I'm wondering if he had no idea, because apparently also from the letter column from issue 11, Joe Orlando designed the Lightning Lass costume. So he was not only the first artist to draw the new Lightning Lass costume at the end of this issue, he designed it as well. So there's a good chance Lido maybe never even saw the costume. So maybe that's why she's not in costume on the Baxter issue. But a year later, when they do the reprint, Steve Lido can go, oh, great, now I can draw her costume because I know what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that and she's featured very prominently on the Tales cover, whereas on the Baxter one, and I have thoughts about this, so maybe we'll get to that in a minute, but even though it says Spotlight on Lightning Lass, it's her brother, Lightning Lad, who looms ominously in the background. He's the biggest character on this cover.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
And I think maybe they had to do that because maybe, again, with Lydon, if he doesn't know what her costume is going to be, if you pick up this book and you don't, are you going to see a Legionnaire? No, you're certainly not their costume. Or if Lightning Lad isn't there, you just see this girl with lightning. You could make a guess that it's Lightning Lass, but there's no costume involved in it. So I wonder if maybe that's why. Because Lightning Lad's not, well, I say this, but in the first 5 issues, he's never really part of that battle. He is in terms of them always arguing and his name being brought up. And whenever the siblings fight, it's always about all 3 of them, not just 2 of them.
Right.
But he's not physically present. So certainly narratively, I can see why they would put him on there. But you're right. Like this is her book, not his book. So, I'm kind of, I like that on the Tales book, they do feature her more prominently. Well, she's the only thing on the cover.
Right.
So, I mean, in terms of like picking one over the other, I actually like both of them. I like the Baxter one because it's a little more narrative, it's a little more storytelling, but I also like the Tales one because it's like, oh yeah, it's rare that you get, well maybe not rare, but there aren't a lot of Legion covers where it's just a solo character. And of course, now that I say that, I'm sure somebody will write in and go, there's hundreds of them.
I would amend that with probably there's not too many of them featuring a solo female character.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, like I said, the box on the Baxter cover is Spotlight on Lightning Lass, but on the Tales it says the power and the fury of Lightning Lass. She's no lightweight anymore.
Sounds like some marketing person got a hold of that. It
does. Yeah. If Stan Lee did the covers to the Legion of Superheroes.
Right.
a poor man Stan Lee.
So yeah, I like that. I like that little bit of Legion nugget, Legion history. That was like, oh, Joe Orlando, according to Paul Levitz, created that costume. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, now I'm really curious as to why, because as you said, Joe Orlando hadn't done interior art, right, for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Or a full issue. I think maybe,
okay, yeah.
Maybe he might have done short stories here and there.
So what's the story behind that? Why Orlando? Why him for that particular issue? And now I'm really curious.
So I try to think of that too, and if we get into the issue, I'm wondering if some of it has to do with the quote unquote alien nature of the setting of this issue, of Zamir's sanctuary, of Zamir's homeworld. That first page where we go to one panel where there are these two animals fighting, and then the next panel where another predator fights, grabs one of them, and then we get a shot of his sanctuary. Feels very much like an old horror intro to a horror book, right? Where you would just go, the first panel would be shadows and trees. The second panel would be a frog getting eaten by a stork or something. I don't know. And then the third panel would be Swamp Thing walking, in shadows, or some haunted house in the middle of some muck. And he has some sci-fi background too. So I wondered if is maybe Paul Levitz paying homage to some of the older creators of DC at the time who were about ready to get, pushed out because of Crisis and the whole new wave of creators. A lot of those genre lines were coming to an end. All the war books were coming to an end. Horror books were coming to an end. So, I could see someone like Paul Levitz sort of trying to keep the old guard in, give them a chance every now and then.
Mm-hmm. I had thought of that as well, and that totally makes sense given its Levitz involvement. But I totally now that you said that, I totally see that first page that you were talking about, the way it's set up. That totally makes sense. I thought, however, it might have more to do with the flashbacks, because Orlando has a real Silver Age quality to his work, and those flashback scenes really reminded me of old Legion books.
Oh, cool!
And it almost seems like the art in the flashback scenes and the modern telling, the modern story, is tweaked slightly so that it does have a different feel. Now, I might be just totally reading too much into it, but that's how it appealed or appeared to me.
No, I get that. I get that. Now that you say it, I can see that, because I feel like the artwork was cleaner and clearer storytelling wise in the flashbacks.
Yeah. And I wonder, though, to be fair, maybe that's Malstead. Maybe that's his doing.
Could be. But there's several scenes, and when I was reading a lot of the feedback from the readers from both the Baxter and the Newsstand run, there were some people who really appreciated what he did. There were some people who just felt it was a subpar issue. I'm somewhere in the middle. But there are a lot of the early pages where they're running through his sanctuary that I have no idea. I can't follow it. I'm like, where are they running to? Why are they suddenly falling? And when they fall and get captured again, they're like on the outskirts of the sanctuary. Like, did they go into some sewer? So at some point I just gave up and I was like, it's not as clear as I would hope it would be. But then at another point I went, you know what? I'm not even sure it matters, because it's really about the story and the memories and Ayla's journey, and it's less about the situation of being trapped by Zamir, because the whole back and forth between the siblings, I was like, we've seen this already.
Yeah.
It got a little monotonous, and just putting them up against Zamir, it's like there's no real danger there,
Mm-hmm.
It's really just a background device for the foreground story.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you hit it right on the nail head. That's kind of what I was reacting to in this story when I first read it. It was just like, where's the dramatic tension? Where's the problem that's being solved here? That's new, because we've had 5 issues of essentially this, where Legion characters are abducted by, it doesn't quite work like that here, but essentially, abducted and captured by a villain, and they get free, they get recaptured, they get free, there's a fight. It's just same old, I guess.
Yeah, and it became an exercise, especially after the first read, and maybe after the second, where I sort of thought, I'm learning something about myself, where the artwork does matter to me as I'm reading it. I sort of always wonder, do I just skim the artwork? Am I just reading the words? Where I realize this time, no, I'm trying to follow this. And I like to think that I'm a semi-smart comic reader. But there's, like I said, there's a couple sequences where, wow, the background, the setting work is very generic and sparse and doesn't help you at all. And then eventually, once I got rid of that, I was like, doesn't matter. Just this, it's enough information. I can follow it. I get the gist. It's not going to be Keith Giffen specific, futuristic artwork. It's not. It's just going to give enough information so that we can get through the larger point. So that's like one of the negatives of this issue, I think. But not being familiar with Joe Orlando's artwork, and I have to assume this is later in his career. I don't want to be too harsh on it, because I know that he has a legacy at DC, and it's a fill-in issue, and he's not familiar with the Legion property, so he's kind of got to do what he's got to do, or what he's used to, I guess. And if some of that becomes shorthand, I just got to go, well, he's doing them a favor.
Peter, do you know, did he do other Legion work besides this? I did not look that up, and I'm Googling it as you were talking. I'm not finding anything immediately here.
Yeah, I'm going to Comic Book DB, and I'm going to look it up and see.
But yeah, like you were saying, I knew of Joe Orlando's work from other books that I read, and I will admit I was not always a big fan of his. And then coming into this Legion story, because this is we're very close to the point where I am totally ignorant of what comes in the Baxter Legion. This is not one of those issues, though. This is something that I did read back then when I was first getting the book, and I remember even then I was thinking, well, this art doesn't seem to fit. Doesn't seem to fit the Legion all that well, except for the flashback stuff. And like I said, I think Orlando conveys a Silver Age-ness in these flashbacks that works really well with me. There are some shots of Ayla that he draws that he and Malstead work on that I think are just quite beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's just sometimes some other stuff is going on in these pages that's not as clean or not as
right.
Nice, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely his only issue, and then in the reprint issue, and apparently he drew one of the figures on Legion 300.
Ah, okay, yes. Oh, yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
Or he was an inker or something, yeah. But again, not to take away from his legacy, and he did create the new costume, which I thought I thought that was cool. That was cool. I was surprised by that when I read it. I thought maybe it would have been a Steve Lytle design or someone who was more familiar, but no, I guess they said, yeah, and at the end of the issue, just come up with a fun costume with her. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, because I guess Giffen wouldn't have been really involved at that point because he was basically off the book by issue 3, where Orlando was working on number 6. So yeah, what do you think of that design? In compare, I mean, we do have a similar looking costume on her brother, not to mention Mech. I mean, they all have the lightning bolts coming into their chest.
Mm-hmm.
So you got that through line there.
It's generic. It's
yeah.
It is.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
It's got the white leggings, just like Lightning Lad has his white interior of his legs, and
so making a connection to something that already exists. They're siblings. They both have lightning powers, etc. Yeah.
At least it's not like showing skin. It's not like a skirt.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not like she doesn't have that crazy updo like she does in her Silver Age appearances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like later. I'm gonna rant here just for a second, Peter. Bear with me.
Okay.
It's not like later Legion depictions. I'm thinking of. I think the Jeff Johns Lightning Saga storyline, where they brought back the Legion. Mm-hmm. The familiar Legion, and suddenly everybody has these sleeveless tunics.
Oh,
male and female, and I hate that look.
Oh,
I don't know who's responsible for that.
Well, as your favorite artist, I'm pretty sure Gary Frank redesigned all that stuff.
Well, that totally makes sense then, doesn't it?
See, I love that. I love all that.
Oh,
stuff.
do you?
Yeah, there's a lot of those redesigns that I was like, yes, I like that. Give Saturn Girl short hair. I like that.
I'm okay with short hair. It's just I don't know. For some reason, I just don't like bare arms, I guess.
When we get to that in the year 2028, then we can really rehash all those designs.
Okay.
Let's get into Ayla's story. Where do you want to go next in terms of the book?
Well, I'm curious because really, we have several pages of them just kind of fighting, right? And they're essentially saying the same thing to each other that they said in the previous issues.
Right.
It's only at the end where it really draws my attention. So I'm going to throw it back to you because I'm really curious to go back to what you first started with, which is the things that you discovered about this or that jumped out at you. I want to know about that.
Okay. Well, the first thing was it was her dialogue on page 23, so near the end of the book. Was it 23? Let me see here. No, 21. Where she says, some people only have to know what they're fighting for, not who they're facing. When I left the Legion, it was because I thought life had gotten too complex, the battles too abstract. I lost track of why I was there. So it made me think, okay, she's referencing, when she says when I left the Legion, she's referencing the Great Darkness Saga, because that's when she decided she couldn't do it anymore. So I knew that much, even if I didn't know the specifics. So I went to, it sounds like a plug, but I went to Comic Book DB again, and I punched in Baxter issue number 6 or one of the issues, and I hit her name. And the good thing about that website is when you hit a character's name, it lists all the issues that character is in, and you can also list it chronologically in publishing order. So I was like, let me see when she actually left. So what I found out was the Great Darkness Saga, the last chapter of it was 295. No, I'm sorry. The last chapter is 294. She was in 295. She was in 296. And then she's like in a flashback for issue 300, I think. But then we don't see her for almost over a year. It's a year and a couple months. The first time you see Ayla again is Legion Baxter issue number 1. So I started to think about, okay, if you're a fan of her, she's been wiped away from the book. She left, and not only did she leave, you didn't even get any like subplot with her. So when I saw that, and I thought, oh, if you were someone who was trying to keep track, and you saw her in issue number 1 of the Baxter run, you were probably like, oh my God, there she is. She's back again. And suddenly that made me think, okay, that puts more weight on having her as part of the Eye for an Eye storyline. I sort of took it for granted. I just assumed we had seen her, right? You know, because when we read the issue 1, it's not like I read all the Legion issues leading up to that. So her reintroduction in issue number 1 suddenly felt like it could have meant something more to readers who were really following her story. So I was like, okay, that's cool. Then I went back to the Great Darkness Saga issue and the 2 after, and I said, let me read her dialogue. I want to see if her dialogue, if Paul Levitz really kept that thread alive. So here's from issue 294, the last chapter of the Great Darkness Saga. Here's Lightning Lass talking to Timberwolf. And she says, I have been thinking about what happened and about the Legion. The Legion wrecks lives. It nearly destroyed my brother. It wrecked his health. And it's ruining us, meaning Timberwolf and Light Lass. Maybe times were simpler when I joined the club, or maybe I'm kidding myself. Memory is like that sometimes. But I know it's not what I want to do with my life now, especially not if we're going to have a life together. I'm quitting. And then in Legion 295, she says to Timberwolf, there's too much pain here, too many losses for all our victories. I can't stay. There's a different life out there for me, and I'm going to find it. And then issue 296, she says to Saturn Girl, who is her sister-in-law, I decided to leave the Legion because something's missing from my life. This team hurts, kills, and maybe it saves the universe every now and then, but it isn't worth it to me. I joined the team to fill in for Garth, and he's been back on the active roster for years now, and it's time I picked up my own life again. So when I read those 3 sequences, this issue suddenly felt way more heavier and connected. The first thing is like when she says, when she's talking about when she was younger, and she says, maybe times were simpler when I joined the club, or maybe I'm kidding myself. Memories like that sometimes. And this issue is all about her memory and her memory of those sequence of events. And then that last line really hit home too, where she says, I was just a fill-in for Garth, and it's time I picked up my own life again. And it made me think of all the flashbacks that we got in this issue. The one we got where she impersonates Lightning Lad because everybody thinks he's dead. And then because of their rules, they can't have 2 beings with the same power. So she finds a way. I think it was Dream Girl. Was it Dream Girl? I think it was Dream Girl.
Yeah, I believe so.
She finds a way to change her powers. So there's 2 events. She's not joining the Legion because of who she is. She's joining the Legion because of her brother. And then she has to change her powers because of her brother or because of the rules. None of those are at her. It's not like it's because of her. You know what I mean?
She has no agency in it.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I was trying to get to. So at the end of this issue, where she finally makes the decision to go, you know what? I do need the Legion. Like that point that she says about the battles were getting too abstract. Some people just need to know, They don't need to know who they're fighting. They just have to have a cause. And it's an interesting counterpoint to the way she felt after the Darkness Saga, where she was like, oh my God, this team hurts people. You know, it's not about the greater good that they do. She's focusing on the negative aspects of it. And she turns herself around and says, no, I do want to be part of that. I finally understand it, and I get to do it on my terms now.
Yeah.
So all of that just made me go, oh, I get it now. I get this issue now.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, considering the things you just brought up, because that sequence of events that you just summarized in terms of her leaving the Legion and why she left the Legion, the eye for an eye story, in many ways, I mean, other than just purely revenge, I mean, we all can, I guess, identify with that desire to get somebody back, right? And in terms of the villains, of course, they want to kill the Legionnaires, but beyond that, this whole notion of going into some other universe and whatnot, I mean, that's, to me, that rings very much in the abstract, and yet Ayla is coming out of this from a totally different perspective now than she did from the Great Darkness Saga, and she's also while she has some agency here. She's taking things on her own terms and dictating things on her own terms. But she's still she's still Lightning Lass in the end. She still in some way arrives at the end where she began, from where she began.
Right.
With a twist.
She's who she was when she first got her powers. So, I think that, I'm not sure I don't think you meant that negatively, that she's Lightning Lass again, right? Or
no, not negatively. I just find it funny that, at least with her being Light Lass, she was different than her two brothers. And yet we have this return to normalcy, so to speak, between the three of them.
Yeah.
In terms of their abilities, right?
Right. But I
just find an interesting connection.
Yeah. And I think she had to come to terms with that again. Like, she had to realize that. I think I even said in one of the previous episodes that, and I might have been reading something into it, where I said some of the dialogue in the first 5 issues felt like she was almost not embarrassed about being Light Lass, but that she wasn't comfortable being Light Lass. Because that's not who she was. I mean, all 3 of them got the powers. None of them have more claim to the lightning than any of the other 2, right? They all got those powers. And then it's what they chose to do with them. Mekt chose to be bad because he felt like he was always an outcast. Garth became a hero. And there's Ayla in the middle, going, I don't know what to do. Especially when you have 2 brothers that, have that much personality, or whatever you want to say. So the first thing she does to become something more than who she was is impersonate her one brother.
Right.
Or become somebody that she had, that's somebody that's different. So I like that she's reclaiming her lightning here and saying that, no, this is who I am, even if I am going all the way back to the beginning. But this is where she should have started from the beginning. She should have started from the beginning as Lightning Lass, not as an imposter, and should have said, take me for who I am. This is who I am. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a rebirth in many senses.
And it's a parallel, and I think we've mentioned this before, to Shrinking Violet. In the terms of, it almost feels like Levitz is taking these characters that were created for story plots first, not as full characters. Like, I think of the later characters that belong to the Legion, like Block and White Witch, Wildfire. We've gotten how many emails about Wildfire now? You know? Invisible Kid 2. These are people that have a very strong personality. And so do some of the other Legionnaires, but they probably got that personality later because it was all about their powers, you know, or all about what wacky Silver Age story do we want to make now and which Legionnaire fits best for it because of their powers.
Mm-hmm.
So he's taking Shrinking Violet, he's taking Starboy in the tail, or, you know, in the newsstand run during that one spotlight, he's taking Ayla and saying, okay, I need to give them a better reason why they are Legionnaires, or a different reason. So I find it interesting that the two characters so far that have had such a major change are these two female characters that certainly Shrinking Violet was no A-list Legionnaire, I can't imagine, and Ayla was just a copy of her brother. And now they become A-list characters in this book now. Mm-hmm. They're like, you know, they're part of the forefront. And I think that's really great. And had I not gone back and read those little snippets of her, I think I would have just brushed this issue off. I think I always brushed this issue off until I realized if you were a longtime Legionnaire, you probably were going, yes, great. Finally, we're getting her back and we're getting her at, you know, even if she's still unsure about where she's going to be, she is not her brother's sister. She is herself, you know. So I dig that. I dig that about this issue, and I dig that about Paul Levitz's, you know, his treatment of these characters feels authentic and caring and like it's planned, you know, and it's not, he's like, okay, I'm going to get back to her. I'm going to make her leave and then I'm going to come back to her. So
yeah.
I dig that. It made me like this issue more.
Yeah, exactly. And these changes seem to come from a character basis, like you were saying, instead of a plot basis. And this may be my failing memory or my incorrect perception, but it seems like starting here in the Baxter run of the Legion, Levitz is starting to redefine the female characters, the female Legionnaires, and slowly but surely over time doing exactly what you just said, that is happening here with Ayla and Violet, you know, because we Projectra starts on that journey too, and
mm-hmm.
will come back later.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just trying to think ahead of some other characters that I know have an arc or a continuing through line, making them much more three-dimensional than they have been in the past.
Right. And trying to show that the team, as big as it is, it's funny, in one of the letter columns, they talk about how you could stick Colossal Boy, Timberwolf, and Ultra Boy, stand them side by side and rearrange their costumes, and you would have no idea who was who. So it's like almost in a way trying to make sure that they don't become cookie cutter or cut from the same cloth. Like let's give them distinct personalities and and it's interesting that you know, if you go back to that Great Darkness Saga stuff where she says, you know, this is just getting too big, too cosmic, and then in this issue where she says it's not about who you fight, it's just, you know, it doesn't matter who you fight. Like the fight is enough, right? The fight to battle evil. And then it made me realize, oh, you know, that's what Mekt is in all 5 issues in this issue. He is a personification. She calls him evil. And, you know, although it was a family squabble for 6 issues, you know, it almost makes her realize there are more Mekks out there. And I'm trying to make it about one person, and it's not about who it is. It's about the cause. It's about Go ahead.
It's about the abstract.
Yeah, which she was striking against before.
Right.
Yeah, there are more mechs out there, and sure, sometimes you may lose, and sometimes a Legionnaire may die, but if you just give up, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it just, and who am I to doubt Paul Levitz? I've always, it's interesting. Sometimes he doesn't get the credit of like a Roy Thomas or a Marv Wolfman from this era, or Walt Simonson, but Chris Claremont, I mean, here's a guy who wrote this book for how many, over a decade, and that's some damn good pickup of a plot line.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me like this issue a lot more.
Maybe to go further on that, Peter, maybe it's because Levitz played the long game on many of these plot lines,
mm-hmm.
and made it seem like it was perhaps less than some of his contemporaries and what they were doing in the other books,
mm-hmm.
because it was just so low key.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, something big would happen, like the Great Darkness Saga, or this big battle between the Legion of Villains and the Legion of Superheroes, and then some other things that I know are coming up. But
right,
it was more about developing these oftentimes soap opera-esque plot lines, character interactions, but at the same time developing, like I said, more three-dimensional characters out of some of these Legionnaires.
Right. And and sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes I get what the writers, the readers are saying, where they're like, oh my God, there's too many subplots or whatever, because like the one failing in this issue, because it's an inventory issue that is done out of sequence, that whole page 7, where Dream Girl is talking to Cosmic Boy and Wildfire and Invisible Kid, where she's saying, we're going to bring the team back. We're still looking for our lost Legionnaires. Hey, Wildfire, or, why don't we use Dawnstar? If you're reading, as I am, the Baxter run and the Tales in the order that they shipped, this sequence on this page, we've already cut in the previous Tales issue. They've already come to Earth. They've already had a discussion. They're already moving forward on how to find the Legionnaires that were lost. And then you read this issue, which comes out after that Tales issue, and you're like, oh my God, this is a backtrack. So that was frustrating. That was a frustrating scene, because I was like, oh God, that we've already covered this, like but like I said, I'm reading it in sequence. So, in order of publication, and, I guess if I was reading it that way back then too, I would probably feel the same thing. I was like, what? Wait, we just went backwards.
Yeah.
And that,
I actually remember that feeling as I was reading, the two at this point.
Yeah. And it also, another reason why you can tell this issue was done earlier, Dream Girl said, or Wildfire says, well, why don't you, someone says, let me see. Oh, Dream Girl says, why don't you try using your power, Invisible Kid, that grabbed Wildfire to get the others back? And Invisible Kid says, I cannot control it. In the wrap up of the Tales story, where Invisible Kid 2 and Wildfire have their little side adventure, you find out that Invisible Kid doesn't have that power. It was the Dream Demon that did it. So it's like, that's not even correct.
It's almost like two different writers are working on these books.
Right.
They're not communicating.
Right. But so it was like a plot that Paul Levitz reconciled and then forgot to like nix it,
Yeah.
The Invisible Kid could have just said, no, I don't have that power, actually. So that was a little frustrating.
Well, so when I asked you to explain your stuff, you jumped right to the scene that I wanted to.
Oh, sorry.
That I had. Oh, no. I just thought it was interesting that you went right to the scene that I thought had a lot of resonance in the story for me. And you touched on a lot of the things that I was gonna bring up, but I really dug this conversation, just like you did, between Ayla and Mecht, and it's really just on those pages 21, 22. This is all Ayla talking. Mm-hmm. Mecht has no voice here, and I thought that was really a cool effect. As she is discovering for herself. Again, I'm going to use the word agency again, but she's discovering the agency that she realizes this thing about herself, this fire within her that she needs to use. It's not just an internal thing, she's externalizing it in this dialogue in front of her brother and totally taking away his power in more than one way, right? Because as they're both hurling lightning bolts or zapping each other, but mostly it's Ayla in her lightning form, as we've seen in previous issues where they don't just throw lightning bolts, they seem to become lightning in a way, or at least are enveloped in lightning. And this sequence here is no different, except that it's Ayla who has the upper hand in many different ways. And as I said, Mecht has lost his voice. He's lost his agency. He's lost his power. And I think that's really what I was responding to in this fight scene, as well as Ayla saying, as you pointed out, that basically calling Mecht evil, that as pure and obvious as it gets, and that means I have to stop you. I also did... just because I like to point out contrary things, I guess. But Mecht, for his, like in my notes, I have Mecht, for his faults, never stopped trying to win over his sister. Yet Ayla apparently has had enough and gives up on her brother. But to be fair, she wasn't trying to turn him. She was mostly trying to just get away from him these last 5 issues. So that's kind of unfair, but I still thought that was just a stray thought I had as I was reading this issue. And so I wondered, in a twisted way, who's the better sibling here? Is it Ayla or is it Mecht? Because despite his protestations and his a couple times in the 5 issues, he basically tries to wash his hands of Ayla, but he still tries to talk her into into joining him. He never really steps away from her. He's a bad dude. Don't get me wrong, but he still tries to convince his sister to join him, regardless of how twisted he is. But Ayla certainly has divorced herself from her brother. In this scene in particular, she exorcises Mecht from her life, and just that whole that dichotomy between them, that the resonance of her life and how she is processing things now, and Mecht being the manifestation of evil in her mind at the moment. All of that just kind of swirls around in this wonderful meaty stew in my head that I just really, really responded to, and that's what saved this issue for me.
Yeah. I have to add too, and it was earlier in the issue, like around page 4 and 5, or 6, where it certainly doesn't excuse Mecht's history, but this whole idea of people on Winath being twins, and he's born without a twin, and it specifically says he was shunned even as a child by all but his family. that's kind of heavy that your society shuns you, you know? And in Mech's warp mind, maybe it became him lashing out to his family. But again, it doesn't excuse what he did. But I mean, we're having this conversation now with youth in America, you know, like being outcasts and people trying to make sure we're watching out for these kind of people, you know, and trying to care for them. And here's a guy that I think we take, you know, like I think I took it for granted that he's just a nut. And he's using him not having a twin as an excuse. But then when you think about his entire society shunned him, they treated him like an outcast. Yeah, no wonder he has issues.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. See, and so again, that's a perfect example of what Levitz is trying to do with some of these background players, filler characters, you know, or just characters that have been around forever that you just kind of take for granted. He's given Mech a little bit of weight here with that. Maybe a little too late in the story, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but at least there's something there. It's not just Ayla here that gets a little bit more oomph to her character.
Right. Yeah, because at one point I wrote that he was just being a one-trick pony when he was saying, "Come, join me." I was like, "Oh my God, We've been doing this since issue 1."
Yeah, exactly.
But he had an interesting arc. He did have an interesting arc. It just sort of fell flat by the end for me. Right. And the whole three of them, if you really get into, like, this is another thing that I didn't research deeply, but I looked up the origins of Lightning Lad because I wanted to see the design of the lightning creatures. Like they look like elephants, right? Mm-hmm. But in some early Silver Age, they don't quite have that same look. They have like in one sequence, they look like unicorns almost. But
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But then I thought, oh, wait a minute. I wonder when they told the story of Lightning Lad, is there an early Silver Age origin where it's just Lightning Lad? And then when you introduce Lightning Lord, oh, well, now you got to include him. And then when you introduce Ayla, oh, now you got to make it all three of them. Because it wasn't all three of them in the beginning of whatever the earliest origin story. Ayla wasn't even around yet. She wasn't created yet. So it's kind of like I don't know, when you wrap up, you know, Kal-El explodes from Krypton. Oh yeah, so does Supergirl. Oh yeah, so does a monkey. Oh yeah, so does a horse. You know, it's kind of like you're building and building and building. So suddenly the origin now has to wrap all three of them up in it. And that, I think that would be something that would be fun to do is, you know, if I have the time, like go back and try to get all of their origins anytime they ever did a Lightning Lad origin and see how it changed from from sequence to sequence. I think even at one point, because Lightning Lord, when he first appeared, I think he was supposed to be from the future of the Legion. And he didn't call him, I don't think he called him Lightning Lad. I think he called him like Lightning Man or something like that. Like Lightning Man is my brother, you know, and I don't know. I don't know the exact sequence of it all, but just their origin, the layering of it. I mean, this is Paul Levitz putting on his Roy Thomas hat and trying to make sense of all of that through her memories. And I think that's a nice little touch.
Well, at this point, I only have a couple more things about Zamir, and
okay,
and these are just really weird, stray things. I guess it's just one thing on Zamir and another thing. Zamir is an interesting character to me, and has been since we've been introduced to him since the beginning of this storyline. And as I said in my notes, Zamir is more than just. We find out in this issue. We find out he's more than just the Legion of Supervillains Uber. And so I want to know more about this character. So, you know, he has this transportation ability, and he's got some machinations of his own. And he left. I say he. I don't know what gender he's supposed to be, but he left his world where he has all these robots and cyborgs. I don't know whatever the hell else he has there. He's doing experimentations, and yet he left that to join this group to do some great thing. And so now obviously I think he did that because of the scientific curiosity this creature may have about discovering or using this other universe that they were supposedly going to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And but he left his home base just there, whatever those robots and stuff were doing. I find it very fascinating, this character that we just get just a taste now in this issue, just a little bit more, and so now I'm actually hoping we get to see him again.
Cool.
And what is that? How would that be? How would that look? So
right.
But I mean, really, he's just there to further the plot of this particular issue.
Sure. Yeah. But it is fascinating in this sort of future book. I like when they showcase beings on both sides, like on the Legion side and on whoever they're fighting, or the supporting characters that are aliens, that truly alien. No humanoid. I mean, this guy has no hands, so I don't know how he created the cyborgs, but he's got no limbs, except for that mace-looking thing. So I like that. I appreciate when the book does that and kind of allows the futureness of this concept to play through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was actually something I picked up in that opening sequence when I looked at the sanctuary design, the architecture. And when I was reading up on Joe Orlando, on Wikipedia, it says that he went to a school in New York that other artists like Carmine Infantino and Alex Toth and other artists, they also came to that school, and they also were, his classmates or whatever. Or maybe they were after, because his design of that building feels like what Infantino used to do. It's like this 60s, mid to late 60s, early 70s neo-futurism with these,
mm-hmm.
These buildings with these like really weird angles. And Infantino used to do it in the Flash book all the time.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And I kind of dug that about this design. It kind of threw me back to that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's that, those older artists, they really latched onto like some architecture that, I forget I forget who one of the main prominent architects was during that time, but it feels very much like that.
Well, that opening shot there on page 1 of that building that you're talking about, it's vaguely reminiscent of the Legion headquarters, the way it's stacked and tall.
Yeah.
Just without all the appendages that it has.
Right. I had a note about, there are a couple things that were interesting. These are little throwaway things. When they're going through, well, first of all, the Lost Legionnaires, page 16 and 17, there's like 5 panels where we get close-ups of each one of them. I really like that. I like what Orlando does on that page, where it's like they're all looking the same direction, but it's just everybody gets their own panel. And, the faces aren't well-defined, but it was a nice breather page.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me think, this issue made me think, oh, yeah, these Lost Legionnaires, and how years later we get a maxi series called Legion Lost, and then we get an ongoing also called Legion Lost. So it's kind of like an ongoing theme for the Legion. They either get shunted to another time, or like Karate Kid did, or shunted to another universe. And since there's a large cast of characters, I guess that's a writer trope that you do with a large cast of characters. Just send a whole bunch of them away.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting.
Well, and when you were talking earlier about the progression of Ayla's story from the Darkness Saga on, I immediately thought of what precipitated, at least in my mind, her one reason why she was leaving the Legion was this weird relationship, sort of speak, thing between Timberwolf and Saturn Girl, because there was a group of Legionnaires, again with Chameleon Boy prominently, when they were stuck on that asteroid
right.
in in the 280s, late 280s, right before the Great Darkness Saga.
Right.
Yeah, 289, A Cold and Lonely Corner of Hell. And that reoccurs throughout the Legion stories that I recall as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's, like you said, mostly you got to break up the cast so you can tell certain stories or spotlight certain characters.
Right.
But I am very curious where they're going and what's going to happen, because I don't remember that at all. Where those Legionnaires end up and why and what happens, I do not know.
Oh, good. Well, there's a little tease in the letter column for this issue. It's in the Reader's Roundup section. Someone asked about the Miracle Machine, and it says, hard as it may be to believe, Matter Eater Lad ate it. But if you'd like another look at the controllers who gave it to the Legion, wait for next issue.
Oh.
Spoilers.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a controller story?
I love the controllers.
I do too. I guess I was just hoping for something, I don't know, a little bit different than the controllers, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm still looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's the way they use them, but I'm a big fan of the controllers. At this point, they're just sort of like an alien race, and then during the crisis, they get Marv Wolfman decides to connect them to the Guardians of the Universe. But there's actually in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, in an issue that comes out, I think, this week, they're bringing back the Dark Stars, which was a 90s concept. And the Dark Stars were the controllers versions of the Green Lanterns.
Right.
So, I used to love when they showed up there. I want to say I haven't read all of Metal yet, but apparently the controllers might make an appearance in that as well. So I love the controllers. I mean, I just think they're so cool for no reason than they're kind of mysterious and nobody ever plays with them. So I'm looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm. I always found it interesting, because it was the controllers who had something to do with the Sun Eater. Is that right? Or is that retconned?
Oh, I never read the original one, so I'm not sure, but I thought it was.
Oh, I think it was.
Yeah. But
when I was first introduced to the controllers, they were just kind of like this semi-benevolent, godlike aliens.
Right.
And then over time, they've morphed into adversaries of many different characters. So I always thought that was interesting, that change in the progression of that particular race.
The other note I took away from one of her flashbacks on page 1213, where she's talking about how Garth was brought back because one of the Proteus sacrificed his life essence to bring back Garth. And Ayla makes a comment. She says in this issue, we still don't understand it all. And I thought, oh, see, this. I know a writer or a listener in the past said we shouldn't jump too far in the timeline to the 5 years later, but the whole Prody Garth thing is explored during the 5 years later.
Right.
And here it is. Like, this is I'm not saying that this is where it comes from, but I like that she flat out says we still don't understand what the hell actually happened there. So, knowing Keith Giffen or the beer bombs, they're probably like, that was a weird thing to happen for Garth. Let's play with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we won't get to that for another couple years. So
At least.
That's all I really had for this issue.
Yeah, that's about all I got too.
Yeah. But I think that's okay. I think we both found some interesting things about it after like maybe a second read, which that's pretty good. I thought, like I said, when I first texted you, I was like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen during that episode. So. Well,
as usual, we can examine things to such a depth that, or at length that we fill some time with our examination.
Yeah. And like I said earlier on in the episode, doing the research made me go back and look at other Legion sequences. And that to me is, that's why I get off on, the whole continuity thing and the larger picture thing, As a one-off, if I had never gone back, I would have said I didn't enjoy this issue. As a way to research her character in a way that I never had before, I'm all for it. I'm digging it. But I think really what I'm looking forward to is seeing her after this issue. And
yes,
I know some things. There's some things I know, but there's some things I don't know. So I'm really curious.
Yeah, I'm really well. I've been looking forward to this since like issue 3 to see where things are going with her and why Levitz and Giffen and Lytle and the rest, why they've decided to bolster her as they have been setting her up in these 6 issues. So what comes next to me should be a big payoff with her, I'm hoping.
Right. Or it'll be subtle, or she will play, and she does. I know later in the Baxter run, she does play sort of like an important part in certain stories. It's interesting that you said that because I remembered that she got her powers back, and there was this spotlight issue that wrapped up the battle between her and Mecht. I didn't think about post issue 6. You know what I mean? Like I just thought that's it. That's what happens. And I was like, yeah, she gets her power back and she becomes Shrieking Violet's partner. And I'm like, oh wait, no, there's more to that. There's more to her. Like this is a big decision for her. So it's good. It's sort of like I'm overwriting the memories that I thought I knew about her and this storyline, and suddenly it's like, oh no, there's actually a lot more to it. So that's cool.
Well, yeah, and now that you mention it, her and Violet's relationship, I'm actually very much looking forward to seeing how that develops over time.
Yeah,
because we talked about this before, how these two characters have over the course of the last many issues up to this point, they've been redefined in many ways.
Right.
And they've gone through a crucible, especially I think more so on Violet's part than Ayla's, but they both have come out of it as stronger, more assured, and definitely in charge of their own destiny. More so, and so there's a lot of parallels between those two characters. And considering where I know that they kind of end up, I really want to see that middle part of that story now.
Yeah,
and see how it develops into what I know it ends up becoming.
Right. So, as an added bonus, although I have hardly any notes for these next 2 issues.
Yeah, neither do I.
Okay, good. Eric and I decided, because we thought maybe this would be, sort of like it's a one-off issue, but we weren't quite sure maybe how long we were going to talk about it. We have 2 more issues that we're just going to make mention of, I suppose, that feature the Legion of Superheroes from modern times, from our present day. Batman 66 and the Legion of Superheroes. From when is that from? Like last year, the end of last year, I think. I could look at it right here. The cover date is September 2017. Yeah, so it probably came out in like I don't know, July, maybe somewhere around there of last year. And then Scooby-Doo Team Up number 33, which came out just in the past like 2-3 months, I think.
Yeah. Interesting. They don't have a cover date on here.
Yeah, they took away the cover dates now with this new DC Comics, DC Universe.
Oh, they did. I did not notice that.
Yeah. All the cover dates are gone. You got to look at the.
Well, that sucks.
So like I said, they're both team ups with the Legion of Superheroes, and you had an interesting observation about the usage of the Legionnaires, and why don't you talk about that?
Oh, is it the fact that they use many of the same Legionnaires in both these issues?
Yeah, from the same era.
Yeah, the same era. Why? Yeah, exactly. Why the love in these two issues? All different creative teams. Why the love of the 60s Legion? Which, I mean, and obviously there's a connection to this issue number 6 as well, because, well, no, I guess that came earlier. I don't know when Ayla first appeared. Was it the 60s or was it the 50s?
Yeah, I want to say it's 67, 68, I think.
Oh, really? That late?
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Okay. But yeah, just there's a lot of 60s Legion love going around recently, and I was just really curious as to why. And I realized, I know that I think you said something about this earlier about the creators latching on to certain aspects because that's what they grew up with, right?
Yeah.
Or those are the things that they really responded to as they were reading comics, and now they're in charge of them. Is it really the Allreds? Are they really into the 60s Legion? And then who's on Fish and Bruzella? I don't know the artist on here. I don't know who that is all that much.
Right.
But it's just interesting that the 60s version of the Legion are appearing in so many different things. And now that I'm thinking about it, there was the Legends of Tomorrow miniseries that featured this is from a year or two ago, featured a story drawn by Bilquis Everly, I think. Anyway, that featured, again, the 60s Legion. And I forgot about that when I was making my notes for this. It's just like, what's going on here? Why?
Yeah. By the way, I was incorrect. She first appeared in 1963.
Oh, well, yeah. Still, that's in our time period here. So,
yeah. I mean, the Batman 66 makes sense because it's Batman 66, so they jump ahead to 2966.
Sure.
And I did look up, and I think they got most of the Legionnaires right. I think every Legionnaire that appears in this issue does appear at least prior to 1968. Like, they didn't use any Legionnaires later than 66, 67, 68. I could be wrong, but so that's kind of cool. Like, because Dawnstar is not in this issue, and
right, yeah. And Shadowlass looks like she used to back in the early days.
Yeah.
But there is one timey-wimey bit that they throw in here that I thought was kind of cool, and that's Ferrolad's talking. He's saying, "We'll take our remaining time bubble. Next stop, the year 2966. Assuming, of course, the time trapper hasn't killed me off again."
Yeah.
And then Brainiac 5 says, "That one time branch with the Sun Eater was a doozy. Took us months to fix that one."
Right.
So that
it's sort of playing.
I love that.
Playing fast and loose. I mean, the whole
whole
concept of this issue is just that they're going back in time, like they did with Superboy, like they did with Supergirl, and they want to go back and meet Robin. They think they call him the greatest teen hero. But so they do, and then there's this whole confrontation between Egghead from the Batman TV show, who goes to the future, and Universo, who from the Legion, who comes to the past. And of course, their connection is that they're both bald, and apparently one is the ancestor of the other. That was strange. But it makes sense from a visual aspect.
Right.
And then at the end, Brainiac 5 says something like, I wonder when we visit the past, are we visiting the same hour past, or are we jumping around the timeline? And clearly that's what's going on here. But yeah, it's a kooky issue. It's fun. It's very Mike. It's very all red. It's very all red. Like, but it was fun. Some of the connections were fun. Some of the character things were fun. And then don't they also? No, that's in the Scooby-Doo team up book, where even though they're the Legion from the late 60s, early 70s, in one of the little cameos, they show them fighting Darkseid, and it's like, oh, well, they haven't fought Darkseid yet.
Right.
Me putting my nerdy glasses on.
Yeah. But even better, it's Bouncing Boy and Shrinking Violet who are fighting Darkseid.
Right.
The most crazy field team that they could throw at Darkseid.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were fun. It was interesting that they both hit some of the same jokes. Like, both of the issues dealt with one of the other characters that they're teaming up with learning how to fly with the flight rings. So, like, Robin and Batman, or Robin he didn't take so easily to the flight ring. Mm-hmm. And I think, what was it? One of the Scooby Gang was trying to learn how to use it as well. So that was interesting. They both had like flight ring jokes. And the second one, the Scooby-Doo team up one, which is where the Legion comes from the future and takes the Scooby Gang to the future because the ghost of Pharaoh Lad, which is another connection between the two, is haunting the rocket ship headquarters. But it turns out it's not the ghost. It's the Emerald Empress and the Fatal Five. And I thought that one was interesting because one of the Scooby Gang kind of ask about Pharaoh Lad, and they say, oh yeah, he had a twin brother. And they said, well, maybe let's go visit the twin brother. And then it made me think of Legion 300, which was also kind of like that same thing about they have this person in captivity that looks like Pharaoh Lad, and they're going through all the memories, and he's actually going through like different alternate universes or whatever. And it turns out, no, it's his brother. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of a play on all three of the stories had all two of these. I mean, Pharaoh Lad is kind of like front and center.
Mm-hmm.
I think it probably is just because that 60s, 70s Legion team is supposed to be when they were at their fullest strength. You know, that happens in the 5 years later thing too, where they talk about the height of the Legion was right before, or maybe like right before Dawnstar and White Witch and Block joined.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and we have the in the 5 year later Legion, we have the SW6 Legionnaires.
Same thing.
Same thing. Yeah.
So I think people just like it because it's when the most, I guess, the roster was at its biggest. It's at their purest. You know, they're just
yeah. That I was going to say something along those same lines, but that's the better way to put it. They're purest. Yeah.
I mean, I read them. They were quick. I think I liked the Batman one better than the Scooby one.
Yeah. It was definitely the, I think, better written one.
Yeah.
And you know, you mentioned Robin. Anytime Robin gets some sort of love, I'm always for that. So.
Yeah. And did you catch the thing at the end of it, right? Where Batman's like, maybe you should start a team.
Yeah. Like, I want that issue now.
Yeah.
I want the Batman 66 Teen Titans team up.
Yeah, he's like, that's a Titanic idea, or whatever he's saying. Yeah. It's like, oh boy. Yeah, they were fun. I mean, I'm glad I bought them. I'm such a Legion completist. I was like, I have to get these issues, and they were fun. They were silly. You know, They are what they are.
Yeah.
Got anything else?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
This is actually, even though we just talked about 2 additional issues, this is actually one of our shorter episodes. I think it will be anyway.
Yeah, once we do the edits and all that. Yeah. And that's good. This is this is good because now we're on. I sort of remember this next storyline coming up, but not as well as I do the first 5 issues.
Right. Me too.
So for the next 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. For the next 6 to 7 issues, I'm a little unclear of what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second year of this run, I go back to familiar ground. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where we go to next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking at that, looking through the listing of my issues and trying to remember when I came back to the Baxter run.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was about the time that they explained away Superboy in the Legion history after Crisis.
That's a great story.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about that.
Oh, there's so many good things coming up in like the second, the third year. Oh, so good.
Right, and so I kind of feel like Voyager, leaving. I'm starting to leave the solar system, familiar ground,
right? And
I'm heading off into deep space, and then returning to complete the metaphor. My signal returning back to home base when it comes to this later. That was a horrible analogy, but
I understand what you're saying.
I'm looking into the abyss of my Legion knowledge here on the Baxter run, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Nice. All right. Well, like we said, you can reach us at peter@thedailyrios.com.
And you can reach me at longboxreview.com.
And as we always do at the end of the episode, ready?
My favorite part.
Here we go.
Long live the Legion Project Podcast.
All right, Eric.
Thank you, Peter. This, as always, is so much fun.
Yep. I'll talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.
See ya. Bye.